Hi, welcome everyone. This is the United Parent Leaders Action Network, or UPLAN, Zoom meeting with updates on the public charge rule. And I am officially going to get us started. So I want to just start by thanking all of you for taking the time today to join us for this important conversation. My name is Erin Moore, and I am the national organizer with UPLAN. And UPLAN, for those of you who are less familiar with it, we are the United Parent Leaders Action Network, and we are a national network of parent leadership organizations that are seeking to affect system and policy change on issues that affect our families. And we have 33 member organizations across the country. If you're interested in getting more involved in UPLAN or getting more informed about our work, feel free to reach out to me. I want to acknowledge that we are co-leading today's Zoom meeting with our partners from the Protecting Immigrant Families campaign, or PIF. The full name of the campaign is Protecting Immigrant Families, Advancing Our Future, and we are a national campaign made up of hundreds of organizations that are coming together to take action on the issues that impact immigrant families, with a specific focus on the public charge rule. Just acknowledging our kind of hosts today, I'm going to queue up my slides here. And while I do that, I want to just thank everybody who was part of UPLAN's initial engagement on public charge. We did a lot of work last year as the proposed public charge rule was coming out to take action and fight it. So many of you were involved in submitting public comments saying why this proposed rule would be so harmful to your communities. And UPLAN has stayed engaged with the way the public charge rule has been evolving over the past year plus. So today's webinar is really a continuation of that work. And many of you have heard on the news, I'm sure, in the last month or so about some changes to the rule being published. So that's what we're here to talk about today, is kind of getting updated on where the public charge rule is now. So I'll just review our agenda today, and for those of you who are on Zoom, you can follow this along on the slides. So right now we are doing a brief welcome and kind of setting the stage for today's conversation. We will then have an overview of the public charge rule, kind of what it is in general, as well as updates that I just mentioned on what has changed in the last couple of weeks. And we will be joined by Catherine Lundy and Connie Choi from the National Immigration Law Center to support us in learning that information. Then we will review some resources that are available to you as parent advocates, parent leaders, and community leaders out in many places across the country, some resources that you can use to educate our communities about what public charge is and fight the misinformation and confusion that keeps our communities down and silent. So we'll go over some resources that exist, and then we'll have quite a bit of time for questions and discussion, 20 minutes before we kind of close out. Some logistics today. We set up this Zoom meeting so that people entering are muted. When we get to our Q&A section, there are two ways you can unmute yourself. If you did the call-in only option, you need to press *6 to unmute and then verbally ask a question. And then please remember to mute yourself again after you ask your question. If you are on the Zoom online platform, you can just click the unmute button, which should be in one corner of your screen, and then again, remute yourself after asking a question. You can also, if you're on Zoom, type a question in the chat box at any time, and I will kind of facilitate questions and make sure that all the questions written in the chat box get read during the question time. I do want to also say there are no bad questions. So as we're going, if there are things where you're like, I didn't totally get that, or I want them to explain that a little bit more, or what? We understand this information can be very dense, and for folks who aren't in the weeds of policy every day, you know, we're here today to kind of put it in plain terms for all of us. So there are no bad questions. Any clarifications or questions are welcome during the question time. And then just a quick announcement. Today's call will be in English, but UPLAN has a commitment to being accessible to our diverse community. And so one of the ways we are putting that into practice is we are holding this a companion webinar to this Zoom meeting, but entirely in Spanish on Monday, September 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. So for anyone who wants to group in your colegas, your compañeras who speak Spanish and have them be informed as well, you're welcome to share the link and invite them to be part of that Zoom meeting. So with that, I am going to transition over to my colleagues at the Protecting Immigrant Families campaign, Catherine Lundy and Connie Choi, and they are going to kind of walk us through some overview information on the public charge rule. So thank you, Kat and Connie.
Hello?
Yes, you should be unmuted, both of you.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna, I think Kat is gonna be presenting on kind of the substance of the rule today. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, Erin, and for the parents on the phone for joining, you know, us today, and for your kind invitation. And so there's a lot of changes. So, you know, I'm so glad that we're going to have a nice Q&A section at the end where we can kind of go into brass tacks about this. But I'm just going to just want to say thank you before I kick things over to Kat.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just go to the next slide.
I'm not sure why it's not advancing, Kat. Hold on, give me 1 second. All right, let me try this one more time. Technology is not always my strongest suit. Here we go.
No worries.
There we go. I think the slide should be queued up now, right?
Yes, perfect. Sorry about the delay. So when we're talking about public charge, we're seeing sort of a trend in the Trump administration with certain policies that he's pushing through different agencies, especially regulatory policies that are directly impacting low-income immigrant populations and mixed status families in general. We won't get into the specifics about everything you're seeing here on the screen, but essentially we've been calling these changes the invisible wall, or these changes that aren't necessarily as, you know, aesthetically you can grab onto, like, you know, a wall at the border, but these are changes that are basically going to keep a lot of low-income immigrants or deny them access entry into this country, and at the same time really sort of restricting and creating these barriers for them to provide for their families, provide for their children, and just be able to thrive in this country. So next slide. The next slide will show basically the timeline of public charge. This is a policy that's sort of been around for a while, and advocates have sort of been bracing for it. So in January of 2017, we saw a leaked draft or a leaked executive order that was discussing public charge and the changes that they're planning to make. And then in January of 2018, the State Department actually did make changes to the Foreign Affairs Manual. Basically, the Foreign Affairs Manual is kind of like a guidebook that consulates, across the globe use when they're looking at green card applications or approving visas to come to the country. These changes that we're going to be talking about today about public charge have sort of already been changed in January of 2018 for people that are going through what is known as consular processing, meaning they're going to a consulate in their home country and applying for a visa or a green card. So in October and December of 2018, some of you may have seen, a public comment campaign about the public charge changes. DHS published the proposed rule for a 60-day comment period, and this was the public's opportunity to sort of weigh in and say, this is terrible, please don't do this, and here's all the people it's going to impact. In July, that final rule went back to the Office of Management and Budget for final review. This is the final office that is supposed to review all the comments that we submitted back in 2018 and put those into consideration when they publish a final rule. August 14th, they published the final rule of public charge to the Federal Register, and now there is a sort of 60-day waiting period before the rule is actually in effect on October 15th, 2019. Meaning that all of the changes that we're going to be talking about today, they're not actually in place right now. They go into effect in October. Next slide. So what is public charge? Public charge is actually a long-standing test that is a part of when someone is applying for a visa or a green card. The prior definition of what a public charge is a person that is considered likely to become primarily dependent on the government for subsistence. So we're talking about someone's main source of support is through government programs or through the government. Usually it's only counted or it's only looked at two categories of benefits, which would be something like cash assistance. So that's temporary assistance for needy families, or SSI, or any sort of long-term care at government expense. But then previously they excluded a lot of the benefits that we're going to be talking about today. So it kind of shows you how big of a change this was. Let's see. That means that, previously we would be able to tell families that were eligible for certain programs like, yeah, this is not part of, it won't impact your immigration status later on, but we can't necessarily make that assurance anymore. So next slide. So part of this long-standing public charge test is immigration officials are looking at a number of different things to make a forward-looking assessment. So making an assessment about an immigrant's future, not an immigrant's past. So they're looking at a lot of different things. There are a totality of circumstances tests. Right there you see what we're calling personal factors. So that would be someone's age, health, family status, size of their family, financial status, education and skills, and whether or not they have an affidavit of support, which is something that not all immigrants have, but some have. And basically, an affidavit of support is a contract that a sponsor, usually a family member, will sign and accept financial responsibility for an individual who's permanently moving permanently to the U.S. They'll look at this as well as whether or not a person is likely to rely on cash or long-term care in the future. No one factor in this entire public charge test, including the use of benefits, no one factor alone can determine whether or not someone is a public charge. There are positive factors that can be weighed against negative factors. Next slide. So where does this test even come up? Okay, so the test comes up when someone applies to enter the U.S. So that would be for like a visa or applies for a lawful permanent residency status, which is also known as a green card. It also will apply to a green card holder who leaves the U.S. for more than 180 consecutive days and then returns. They will also apply to a narrow group of immigrants that are seeking to extend or change their non-immigrant status in the U.S. So to sum it up, it's when an immigrant applies to enter lawfully into the country through either a visa or a green card, or even if they already have a green card, they leave for 6 months and then come back, it's going to apply again. Next slide. This test does not apply to everyone. There are a lot of people that the public charge test of admissibility does not apply to. So if you are already a green card holder applying for citizenship, this does not apply to you. If you have a refugee or asylee status, or you're applying for this status, it does not apply to you. It does not apply to survivors of domestic violence, trafficking, or other serious crimes. So U or T visa applicants, or URT visa, people that have URT visas. And it does not apply to special immigrant juveniles and a bunch of other humanitarian immigration statuses. And then next slide. So here are sort of the big changes to public charge that everyone's talking about. So there's a new definition that's way different from the one that I just described. And then they've kind of changed that personal factors test. They're going to be basically creating different types of weighting systems for the good things and the things that they don't like so much. And it's basically making it harder for low and moderate income people to pass this public charge assessment. And then the last thing is the additional benefits that are now part of what immigration officials can consider when they're doing a public charge assessment. Next slide. Okay, so again, our previous definition, this was an immigrant likely to become primarily dependent on the government for subsistence. The new definition, or the final definition, as we've seen it since August 14th, is a person who receives one or more public benefits for more than 12 months in the aggregate within any 36-month period, which is like, what does that mean? So basically, if you are using, they're counting each benefit that you use in a month. If you use like 2 benefits in 1 month, that counts as 2 months. And so that's how they're doing the math of receipt of public benefits for 12 months within any 36-month period. Complicated. Next slide. And then here is that personal factors test that we were talking about earlier. This is what is in the final public charge rule. So now income is a the income factor of the personal factors portion of public charge is now one of the most important things that can tip the scale for someone's application. So if you are under 25% of the federal poverty level, which is about $32,000 for a family of 4, that's a negative. And if you are above 250% of the federal poverty level, which is about $64,000 median income for a family, $64,000 for a family of 4, that's a positive. But now if you're under the age of 18, that's a negative. If you're over the age of 61, that's a negative. They're going to be looking at education and skills. They're going to look if you have proficiency in English, particularly if you have a certificate or a diploma to prove that you have proficiency in English. They're going to be looking at your health and whether or not you have a medical condition that would likely require extensive treatment or maybe interfere with your ability to care for yourself, attend school, or work. They're going to be looking at family status, so how many people are in your household or how many people you have to take care of or support. And then they're also going to be looking at the affidavit of support. Now, previously, an affidavit of support, or this contract, remember, that you have with a sponsor was enough to overcome sort of this public charge determination, but that's no longer the case anymore. They're going to be looking at a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. And then on the next slide, you'll see a chart of, the benefits that used to be part of that long-standing policy before August 14th when we saw this new rule. And then here are the new benefits that are going to be considered by officials in this new rule that would go into effect on October 15th. So previously, again, it was cash assistance for low-income maintenance, and then long-term institutional care government expense. So that was like TANF and SSI. In the new rule, they're going to be looking at SNAP, Medicaid, but with Medicaid, there are some exceptions. You'll see them listed on the bottom. Emergency Medicaid is not considered. Coverage, Medicaid coverage of children under the age of 21 are not considered, and Medicaid used by pregnant women or women 60 days after they give birth, that will not be considered. They're also now incorporating federal, state, local, and tribal cash assistance into the new plan. And then lastly, they're adding housing assistance as a benefit that can be considered in the new rule. So things to keep in mind, I'll go to the next slide, is even after I've said all that, these rules are not in effect yet, and the rule only applies to applications that are going to be submitted after October 14th or on or after October 15th. Any benefits that are used prior to this date are not going to be considered. Another important thing to keep in mind is that not everyone is subject to this public charge rule. Many immigrants are exempt, and there are a lot of people that are getting a little confused about whether or not it would apply to them, like people applying for citizenship. It does not apply to people applying for citizenships. And again, benefits used by family members will not be counted in a public charge assessment. So if your kid is the recipient of SNAP, and that their use of SNAP will not be counted against your immigration application. And remember that positive factors can be weighed against negative factors. So maybe you don't have a diploma with English proficiency, but you have a great job, you're in great health. That's a good thing. These things can be weighed against each other. And lastly, every situation is different. There's no way to paint a broad brush about what's okay, what's not okay, what is my situation. We really recommend that if people have specific questions that they consult with an attorney. And then the next slide, we're going to be basically talking about what do we tell immigrants and their families. And I'm going to give Connie the opportunity to take over here if she wanted to, because I just realized I went through all the slides.
No, go for it. I think you're doing a great job.
Okay, great. All right, we'll keep going, everyone. Okay, so what do we do? What do we tell immigrants and their families when it comes to public charge? Because like I just said, this is very, very complicated, so it's really hard to feel confident in giving the right advice to somebody about what to do about their situation. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll talk about messages for community members. So one of the first things I want to say right off the bat is that we need to be able to fight fear with facts and know our rights. The public charge rule, this was designed to be confusing. It was designed to be complicated. It was designed to be scary on purpose. But immigrants, no matter who you are in this country, there are rights, and you have them no matter where you were born. So the more we empower communities with education, the better we are going to be sort of curbing the chilling effect that this policy has been having. Next, I'm going to say it's not over. There's totally still a chance to stop this rule. You might have also seen this in the news. There are, I think, 6 or 7 different lawsuits that have already been filed to try and stop this. So it may never actually go into effect if those lawsuits are successful. So just stay tuned for that. Again, the public charge test, again, does not apply to every immigrant. Look at the list. There are so many exempt immigrants, including refugees, asylees, and again, lawful permanent residents that are applying for U.S. citizenship. This does not apply. Next slide. The use of public benefits alone does not make somebody a public charge. Again, there's so many parts to this test that people are trying to juggle, but benefits use, just because you use public benefits doesn't make you a public charge. There are all these other factors that are going to be looked at in someone's application. The public charge test does not consider benefits used by family members. So benefits used by eligible family members are not counted unless the family members are also applying for a green card. So if your kid is using SNAP and he's going to apply for a green card, that use of SNAP is going to apply to his green card, but not for yours. So if you have a U.S. citizen child that is using SNAP and you're applying for a green card, his use or her use of SNAP will not apply to your green card application. Again, the rule does not consider benefits that are used before October 15, 2019. So I know there's like a big rush for people to sort of disenroll, but again, the benefits that you're using now aren't being counted in your test anyway. And then I'd say, lastly, your personal information is protected. There are so many rules from federal, on the federal side and on the state side that protect people's information when they are applying for assistance or applying or enrolling in public benefits programs. Only in like super rare instances is that information shared for purposes other than just administering the program. Next slide. So how are we responding to these questions? Because they can get really specific. So here's an example of a slide of 3 really, really specific questions and some examples of how you might answer those questions. So first question being, I'm scared to sign up for WIC. I know that WIC is public benefit, which you might answer like this. WIC is not included in the public charge test, and we encourage you to sign up for programs that you're eligible for. So again, WIC is not on that list of considered benefits. If someone is eligible, they should enroll in WIC. Next question would be, I'm pregnant and need help. I'm currently enrolled in Medicaid, but I'm afraid it will be used against me. The public charge test will not consider non-emergency Medicaid used by pregnant women up until 60 days and up until 60 days after they give birth. So we encourage you to get the health care that you and your baby need. Coverage under my Medicaid plan is the only option for health insurance for my children who are 12 and 19 years old. The public charge test has an exception for children under the age of 21 that use Medicaid. Your kids fall under that exception, and their use of Medicaid will not be considered in the public charge test. Next slide. Oh, might actually have Erin cover this one.
Yes, thank you so much, Kat. Yeah, I really, really appreciate your expertise and how well-versed you are in this stuff being with us today. Before we open up for questions, I do want to just go through some resources that are available, and all of these resources, links to all of these resources, as well as this PowerPoint, will be emailed out to everyone who registered for this Zoom meeting. So you will get a follow-up. One resource is UPLAN's fact sheet on changes to the public charge rule. It is available in English and Spanish, and it's intentionally written in really simple language. We got feedback from parent leaders in our membership last year as we were advocating on this policy that any way we can simplify the language and distill down the information would be helpful. And the fact sheet also has links to a legal services directory for folks who want to find a personal immigration attorney. Oh, my share stopped working again. I'll just keep talking. The Protecting Immigrant Families campaign also has a lot of resources available in multiple languages. So they have many fact sheets that are translated into Spanish, English, Arabic, Hindi, Chinese. So we encourage you to go to protectingimmigrantfamilies.org/knowyourrights to see some of those. I'm also going to be emailing out a link to an online portal to contact your representatives in the U.S. House. Because there is a federal bill that has been introduced called the No Federal Funds for Public Charge Act, introduced by Representative Judy Chu in California, and it has 87 co-sponsors right now. And if this bill were to pass, it would block federal funds from being used to implement the public charge rule. So you can imagine what it's going to take to implement this. The complexity of this test is pretty daunting. So this bill would block federal funds from being able to be used for that. So we will email that link out as well. All right. so we are going to open up for questions. Again, there are no bad questions, no questions too simple. And if you need to unmute yourself, you can either do so on Zoom by clicking unmute, or if you called in by pressing *6, as well as using the chat.
No dumb questions. This was really complicated.
So I will add, I mean, in terms of, as parent leaders, getting co-sponsors for the CHU bill that Erin mentioned is going to be really key. And next month, we'll likely have a companion bill on the Senate side introduced by Senator Hirono of Hawaii. And so we're going to need definitely your help and advocacy in terms of getting co-sponsors for that bill as well. The other piece that Kat didn't really mention too much is that we are anticipating another proposed rule on public charge that relate to the deportability grounds everything that Kat mentioned today has to really do with somebody who's seeking to enter the U.S., right, on a visa, or, who wants to get that green card. There is a very limited test with regards to public charge that would render somebody deportable, but it's really, really narrow and it's hardly ever used. But we are anticipating a proposed rule coming out from the Department of Justice, not the Department of Homeland Security. And so we will definitely need your help in terms of getting as many comments as possible submitted to fight back against that rule. And I would have to underscore how key you were in terms of helping us delay the rule. So, Kat mentioned, right, at the very beginning that we had this timeline in which we saw the public charge rule changes as an executive order in the very first days of the Trump administration. And it was really through the advocacy of folks like you that we've been even able to delay the implementation of this rule until now. So, we, I think, got 266,000 plus comments. It was the Department of Homeland Security record submitted last fall, and it was because people, and it's because of that we were able to delay the implementation up until now in terms of the DHS final rule being issued in August. Is it still August? Yes, it's still August. And so I think, I just want to underscore like how instrumental y'all have been in terms of, getting us to even this place. And, we're going to try to fight this through the courts. I think another, as you're kind of interfacing with your own, other parents that you're working with, talking about the October 15th implementation date and saying, look, it's not set in stone yet, right? Like we still have a chance to fight this. We'll, knowing, Kat just went through this presentation and you can see how wonky it is, right? In terms of it's hard to pick it up as an issue. And so we've been emphasizing with our partners and with our community members, like, look, like educate yourself now because it does take time. It's not a test that's easily understandable, right? And so just wanted to underscore, like, there's lots of opportunities moving forward, I think, to continue to stay engaged, and I would highly encourage you to do so.
Thanks, Connie. We do have a question and comment in the chat box from Shani Cooley. She says, great, Mississippi just had a large immigrant raid, and I wanted to know what resources you might know of for those facing deportation and their families.
Yeah, we actually have been working with partners who have actually been advising folks in the raid. At this point, as I mentioned, with regards to the public charge test with regards to the grounds for deportability, it's really limited. So, and we have resources on our website that I would direct you to that really go into detail on this, but part of what needs to be met is actually somebody needs to have like unlawfully used benefits that they were not eligible for. there should have been a court decision, basically that seeks, the debt to be repaid, essentially, as well. And there's like a whole bunch of other steps that need to be taken in order for somebody to be rendered deportable by them. So it's really quite limited. And so when you talk about what's happening with regards to the Mississippi ICE raids, we really didn't see a nexus in terms of folks that might get picked up there, right? That being said, we did work with attorneys on the ground, and then just provided technical assistance to folks there who've really been kind of at the front lines in terms of fighting back, and it's something that they're aware of.
Thanks, Connie.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Julia Sosa from PK, from California. My question, I heard she says people who have asylum or refugees, they won't be affected. So people, we know most of Latino community, they don't have any of these benefits. So people who have TPS or something like that, Central American, I believe they have, do they gonna be affected, or which role they gonna be on? We know this is, like she says, this is scary and confusing. So it's really they get the purpose.
Kat, do you want to take that
on? Yeah, and you can just correct me. Public charge will not apply to someone, say, that's applying for DACA or doing a DACA renewal. In both of those applications, applying for DACA or renewing your DACA, public charge does not apply. The only time that public charge would apply for someone that, say, has DACA status is if they were trying to adjust their status through, like, a family petition. Correct, Connie? Like, say, getting married? Yep. Okay. And then the same would go for TPS. So public charge, when they're applying for TPS, renewing DACA or applying for DACA, public charge will not come up. But it may come up if they decide to petition through a family member. Then the public charge test would come up.
Yeah, and so just to kind of like put that in layman's terms, like let's say you are a TPS holder, right? And you ultimately decide that you want to get married and have a path to citizenship via marriage, a marriage-based green card, then you would be subject, right, to the public charge test at that point, even though you are technically a TPS holder. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
And if I could add just one thing while we're talking about it, like, yes, the test that we just went over is really complicating about who it applies to, what does it come up, benefits considered, and all these other personal factors. But I also just want to stress that, we see it a lot where immigrants are, disenrolling out of fear. They just like, you know what, I don't even want to have anything to do with benefits because they think that it'll actually, help them. And it's true. It's the one part of the test that they can, control the most, I guess. But at the same time, in this test, like, even if you don't use benefits, like, you could still be considered a public charge. So when we're talking about programs that actually help you in the long run, they help you get a better job, they help keep food on the table for you and your family, like, these are sort of the tough decisions, but, there's no right answer. So I'm not sure how much, disenrolling from a program that could actually make your eventual test look worse, because, like, maybe you didn't take advantage of these programs. Like, I don't know how much that would be benefiting somebody. So if you're talking to concerned family members that are saying, but I'm in SNAP, I need to disenroll, or I'm in, Medicaid, and I'm not in, this exempt status, I would just, show them that there's, like, that's the part that you can control, but then there's all these other things, and maybe, disenrolling could actually have a more detrimental impact when you eventually do apply. There's really no right answer, but, anything we can do to sort of, make sure that immigrants are still accessing programs that help them in the long run.
Yeah, and frankly will actually make your personal factors test much more positive, right, at the end of the day. And so I think, we try to encourage folks to take a look at the long run, right, in terms of your ability to thrive and your ability to, care for your family, et cetera. And we know that benefits actually have a positive effect on that, right? And so would encourage you to kind of share that message out as you're talking with other parents in your community.
Yeah, and sort of to piggyback on what Connie said, especially when it's coming to a benefit that your U.S. citizen child uses, when this test doesn't apply to them, they can access those. That's their right to access those. So another thing I would bring up.
Thank you. Any folks we haven't heard from want to either ask a question, or we would love to just hear how you're planning to take this information back. Any information you're hearing from people in your communities that could help us as UPLAN and the Protecting Immigrant Families campaign strategize about how do we continue doing Know Your Rights work and empowering communities with knowledge moving forward. We would love to hear.
So, I mean, it sounds like we're kind of at the end, but I will say, like, one thing that we really try to do within the campaign is actually be as connected to folks on the ground as much as possible who are really dealing at the front lines with this issue. And so, one thing that, we always try to be cognizant of is, like, as you're learning and kind of engaging with your own parents in your communities, like, if you're finding that, for example, let's say some of the talking points that we raised here are not that helpful, that they're triggering, and or that you're finding other ways to talk about this issue that's actually quite, resonating very well with your audiences, like, we want to hear about that. We actually see all of our documents and, talking points, et cetera, as kind of living in and of themselves, and we're constantly revising them based on lessons learned that we're hearing from our partners. And so, if you have any feedback to share, if you're seeing kind of dynamics on the ground that, is really concerning for you and want to flag that for us, like, we actually want to hear that, and we try to be as responsive as possible. And so, I think, like, Erin and I, like, talk on it, like, reaches out, like, on a regular basis, like, and so, like, and I think we have an open door policy for that. And so just let us know of trends that you're seeing on the ground, of stories, of individuals being affected by this, et cetera, and families, frankly, and we will try to provide as much support to y'all as possible.
Yeah, I'll be the first to say I love love letters and I love hate mail. So if you see something that you just isn't working, like, let us know, because that actually might be something that helps out someone else in a whole other part of the country, right, that works with a whole different community. It's really crowdsourcing that is making these materials better and making them stick. I've been on calls, like, the past 2 weeks with different individuals in Wisconsin and Texas and Florida, and asking them, so what was it like? We were anticipating what, the rule finalization would be like in communities, and I wanted to hear, like, what actually happened. And I'm hearing people that are asking the same questions around. A lot of questions are coming in about family members' use and children's use of programs. A lot of people, we notice that, like, when we repeat the same things, kind of over and over again, that's when, like, the light bulb goes on. I go, oh, maybe I should listen to this lady. Any sort of even tips that you've found that were successful in translating, the complicated thing that we just described, I'll take it, even if it's something like little or small. Anything that makes these materials better, like, we totally want to hear it.
Thanks, Kat. This is Erin. I will also mention UPLAN has an immigration policy committee that is made up of parents and organizers from our membership that is going to be kind of leading our strategy on, for example, working on co-sponsorship for the No Federal Funds for Public Charge bill, potential public comments on the Department of Justice rule that Connie mentioned. So if you're fired up to get involved on the advocacy side and are feeling the heaviness that I'm feeling of what this attack on our communities means and can mean going forward if we're not able to stop it, you are welcome to join that committee and just get in touch with me. And I am putting our contact information up on the slides, which will be emailed out as well. And as Connie and Kat said, you're welcome to reach out at any point. As I said, I will email out the PowerPoint and links to the resources that we mentioned today. I'll either do that today before the end of the day or early tomorrow. And again, we will have a companion webinar to this session on Monday, September 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time, and I will email out the registration info for that with the follow-up email as well. So if there's nothing else from folks on the line, we will close out today. I know it's getting late in the afternoon for some of you, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and I send you forth with strength and courage as we go out into our communities to talk with folks about their rights and what the public charge rule means for them. So thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.